So where we left off was we talked about demand, and the product life for functional products is long. Innovative products is going to be short because you have to come out with this innovation quickly and over a short period of time. The inventory value is going to be low because you're going to be selling these functional demand characteristics pretty fast. Whereas if it is going to be innovative, because of the uncertainty, the innovative value is going to be high. The product variety is low in the functional characteristic, whereas it is high in innovative characteristic products. The volume is going to be high in a functional product, whereas it's going to be low in the innovative product, simply because, again, of the variability and the uncertainty that we have for the innovativeness. And that follows the stock out cost as well. In the manufacturing process side, breakdowns are few in a stable manufacturing process, whereas in an evolving, it is higher. You can guess why it is, because evolving includes certain uncertainties, and they are in the process of making it perfect, so there could be more breakdowns. The process yield is higher when it is stable and lower when it is evolving. That is expected. The quality problems are few because it is stable, whereas it is more if it is evolving. The supplier sources are also many for stable processes because it has been there for a while and it is stable now, and that is the reason you have more suppliers. Whereas if it is an evolving, you're going to have very few people who are going to be working with you to come out with the new manufacturing processes. So that's why it is few. And the lead time is dependable in a stable environment or stable process environment, whereas it is difficult to predict if it is going to be an evolving kind of a process characteristic stages. So supply chain strategy looks at efficient supply chains, that is to create the highest cost efficiency, risk hedging supply chains, to reduce or share or get rid of these risks. So you have certain strategies, and these strategies are usually pooling or sharing resources. Responsive supply chains, on the other hand, utilize strategies aimed at being responsive and flexible. Agile supply chains utilize strategies being flexible and responsive to the customer needs. So those are the supply chain strategies that we talked about. This is a summary of what we have been talking about. This comes to outsourcing. Outsourcing is moving some of the firm's internal activities and decision responsibilities to outside providers. Now, when I say outside providers, as we talked about, it can be in the same street, in the same city, in the same state, in the same country, and that are also outside the country, whether it is going to be or Mexico or Canada or far off country like India or China or Japan or Korea or Thailand and Vietnam, so on and so forth. Outsourcing allows a company to create a competitive advantage, and basically it reduces cost. Competitive advantage, reducing cost, these are the main factors of outsourcing. Now, companies can outsource an entire function or some elements of an activity and then keep the rest in-house. For instance, if General Motors is making cars, they're going to get most of the parts from outside the country. some from Mexico, some from Canada, some from Europe, some from Asia. But they're going to keep the remaining in US, but it still can be outsourced. General Motors can outsource it to companies in Chicago, in Indiana, or in Ohio, or Pennsylvania, or other parts of Michigan as well. Okay, so a company does all these outsourcing based on what it seems like a competitive advantage for them and a reduction of cost for them. The reasons to outsource are getting benefits. There is a financial reason, there is an improvement reason, there is an organizational reason. Financial reasons, we talked about it before. Basically, you want to improve the ROA, return on assets. How do you do that? By reducing inventory and selling unnecessary assets and doing outsourcing. You generate cash by selling low return entities. You gain access to new markets, particularly in developing countries, because it is cheaper for you there, like India and China and all that, or Brazil, for instance. They reduce the cost through lower cost structures. That is the whole idea of this financial outsourcing. Improvement, on the other hand, sending out outsourcing might improve quality and productivity because those people who are actually doing those parts are more focused in doing those parts rather than the big picture of making big items like cars and tanks and planes and so on and so forth. It shortens the life cycle time. It shortens the cycle time. And often you can find better expertise and skills and technologies which are not available in this country. Companies go out for outsourcing their business processes for IT related work to India simply because you have better skills and technologies and expertise in India than in this country. And also you improve risk management because you're putting the risk on somebody else. You are shifting your risk to somebody else. So that way you are not taking risks. And also you improve credibility and image by associating with superior providers. For instance, Microsoft in this country associated themselves with companies in India to get software because companies in India had a level 5 type of organization. And level 5 software companies are very hard to find in this world. And India has got a lot of those companies. So Microsoft associated themselves with that. So did HP, so did IBM, and many other companies in this country. Not only software companies, hardware companies, but also government entities. They're also going and looking for these level 5 companies in India. Organization-wise, you improve effectiveness by outsourcing because you are focusing on what you can produce. You are not focusing on simple products like making screws and nuts. You are making cars. Your profit margins are going to be high because you're making the big ticket items rather than making these screws and nuts. You also have an increase in flexibility to meet changing demand because you have the suppliers. If you cannot find one supplier, you can find another supplier in a different country. So that way you can manage or hedge risks basically when unexpected demands come up. Whereas if you're doing it inside the company, you have to buy more assets and that will go waste later on. So it's going to be financially detrimental to you. That is the reason organizationally outsourcing makes sense. Logistics is supporting the material flow from suppliers, and also supporting your end products to your customers. Basically, it includes purchasing, shipping, distribution of the products, so on and so forth. Logistic providers, they're also called third-party logistics, 3PL. 3PL stands for third-party logistics. Third-party logistics providers include UPS, FedEx, and many other transportation companies. And the third-party logistics providers, they track the shipments for you, they notify the customers for you, they reduce your risk and variability. That is the biggest benefit of using the third-party logistics providers. So, supplier relationships are one of the important parts of procurement. There are three different characteristics that you can think of. One is called the coordination characteristics. Another one is investment in strategic assets characteristics. And the third one is IP or intellectual property characteristics. So let's look at outsourcing and these characteristics. When you think about coordination characteristics, there are standard interfaces, required information, standard prices, quantities, delivery schedules. These are part of the outsourcing for coordination. Whereas investment in strategic assets, you're looking at assets that are commonly available from a large number of potential suppliers. So you don't need to buy these machines. You have these commonly available machines that are available to these people outside the country or outside your state, somewhere where you can outsource. That is the investment in strategic assets. So you don't need to be investing that. You're going to be asking somebody else to invest. Now, I'm sure you've heard about the cloud as such, where you can store, let's say, data. You've heard of that. So there are a lot of companies like Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, HP. These companies have cloud structures where you have computers in somewhere else. And educational institutions like Roosevelt can say, hey, I'm going to, instead of store my data here, I'm going to store it with Amazon. But I'll just be paying them monthly fees to store my data. That way, I don't need to buy costly assets like databases, database systems, big computers, networking, people who are maintaining these things. I don't need to spend for all this. I'll just spend some fees in the cloud somewhere, and this company will take care of all my problems. So you're basically taking your risk and pushing it to somebody else. That way your risk is reduced and also your investment costs are reduced. The third thing is intellectual property. And this is a real big problem whenever we talk about supplier relationships. Simply because the intellectual property is owned by you, your company. And when you're asking somebody else to make your product, you're actually sharing that intellectual property with them. So you need to have a strong intellectual property protection. And that involves a lot of attorneys in different countries and how they work together to make sure that these intellectual properties are protected pretty well. There are certain things like very difficult to imitate technology that you don't want to give. For instance, United States has got some limitations on technologies that work with carbon, for instance, with other countries. So you cannot ask other countries to make products consisting of carbon. There are many reasons, including risks and a lot of technology.